You are about to hear scary carnival horror stories. Subscribe and receive more scary stories. Every year, the carnival came to town, lighting up the night with its bright lights and joyful music. It was our tradition. My friends and I wouldn't miss it for the world. This year was no different, but something felt off. The smell of cotton candy and popcorn filled the air as we wandered through the crowd. Laughter and cheerful screams surrounded us. My friends, ever the thrill-seekers, dared me to enter the haunted maze. I couldn't back down. With a mix of excitement and apprehension, I accepted the challenge. The entrance was ominous, with flickering lights and eerie decorations. My friends cheered me on as I stepped inside. The door creaked shut behind me and I was plunged into darkness. At first, it was almost laughable. Fake cobwebs, animatronic ghosts, nothing too scary. But then the air grew cold. The cheerful carnival sounds faded, replaced by a chilling silence, and then the whispers began. Shadows moved out of sync with the lights. My heart pounded as I tried to find my way through the maze. That's when I saw it, a hidden door. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door and stepped into a new section of the maze. It felt alive. The walls seemed to breathe, the paths constantly shifting. That's when I saw her. A woman in a tattered dress, crying blood. She looked up and our eyes met. I turned and ran. My phone had no signal. Every turn I took seemed wrong. The whispers grew louder, calling my name. Alex! Alex! In the distance, I saw a figure. Help! I shouted. But as I got closer, I realized it was another ghostly apparition. Finally, I found an emergency exit. Bursting through the door, I felt the cool night air against my skin. Disoriented, I found my friends. They were relieved to see me, but something felt off. The carnival was closing. Hours had passed, but it felt like minutes. As we left, I glanced back and saw her, the woman from the maze, standing at the entrance, smiling eerily. At home, I tried to shake off the experience. But late that night, the whispers returned. I found a piece of the maze in my bag, a torn piece of her dress. The terror wasn't over. It had followed me home. Now, every night, I hear them. The whispers, the cries, and I know the maze is waiting for me to return. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the abandoned amusement park, I found myself standing at the rusting gates of Wonderworld. The park had been closed for over a decade, left to decay in the elements, but tonight, curiosity had driven me to explore its haunted remains. I'd heard the stories growing up, the disappearances, the inexplicable accidents, but it wasn't until I was dared by my friends that I finally decided to see it for myself. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and rust, a far cry from the sweet scent of cotton candy and popcorn that must have once filled the air. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of a ride swaying in the breeze. I stepped over the threshold, my flashlight slicing through the darkness, revealing the twisted skeletons of roller coasters and broken-down game stalls. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the park itself was urging me to turn back. I made my way towards the center of the park, where the Ferris wheel loomed, its carriages swaying gently as if moved by unseen hands. A shiver ran down my spine. The urban legend spoke of a child who had fallen from the wheel on its last night of operation, and it was said that his spirit still haunted the ride. I dismissed the thought as nonsense, but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As I approached the Ferris wheel, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. Fresh footprints in the dust, leading towards the ticket booth. Someone had been here recently. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and shift. I followed the footprints, my pulse quickening with each step. The booth was empty, but the glass window was smeared with what looked like blood. Panic bubbled in my chest, but I pressed on, determined to find out who or what was here. The sound of distant laughter echoed through the park, faint and distorted. I whipped around, scanning the darkness, but saw nothing. The laughter grew louder, more maniacal, and seemed to come from all directions. My flashlight flickered again, then died, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled with the batteries, my hands trembling. In the pitch black, I felt the air grow colder, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Finally, the flashlight flickered back to life, and I found myself facing the entrance to the funhouse. Its once vibrant colors had faded to a sickly hue, and the entrance gaped open like a monstrous mouth. The laughter continued, now unmistakably coming from within. I hesitated, but the thought of backing out now seemed cowardly. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The funhouse was a maze of cracked mirrors and narrow corridors. The distorted reflections twisted my own image into grotesque forms, adding to the sense of unease. The laughter had stopped, replaced by a low, humming noise that set my teeth on edge. I navigated through the maze, each turn revealing more unsettling scenes. A mannequin with missing limbs, a clown figure with its face melted off. My heart pounded in my chest, urging me to run, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the horrors around me. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, but saw only the warped reflections in the mirrors. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I broke into a run, twisting and turning through the maze, desperate to find the exit. My breath came in ragged gasps, and just as I thought I would collapse, I burst through a final set of curtains and into the open air. I doubled over, trying to catch my breath, and looked back at the funhouse. The laughter started again, now mixed with the sound of clanging metal. I didn't wait to find out what was making the noise. I sprinted towards the exit of the park, the sinister sounds following me until I finally crossed the gates and collapsed on the ground outside. My friends were waiting, their faces pale with worry. They helped me up, and as I looked back at Wonderworld, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing at the entrance, watching me with glowing eyes. I never went back to Wonderworld, and I never spoke of that night again. The park was demolished the following year, but the memories of what I experienced still haunt my dreams. I remember my first week as a night security guard at Lakeside Amusement Park vividly. It was supposed to be an easy job: patrol the grounds, make sure no one sneaks in, and keep an eye on the rides and attractions. The park had been around since the 1920s, and while it had its share of ghost stories, I never took them seriously. I figured most of the creepy tales were just part of the park's charm, a way to attract more visitors. My shift started at 10 p.m., and by midnight, the park was deserted. The only sounds were the distant hum of the city and the occasional creak of a ride in the wind. On my first night, I took my time walking the grounds, getting familiar with the layout. The Ferris wheel, the roller coasters, the funhouse, all cast eerie shadows under the dim security lights. I radioed in every hour, reporting that everything was quiet. It was on the third night that things began to feel off. I was doing my rounds near the carousel, a beautiful antique with hand-carved horses, when I heard music. Soft, whimsical music, like the kind you hear from an old music box. I checked my watch, 1:15 a.m. The carousel was supposed to be completely shut down. I walked over, expecting to find some electrical malfunction, but as I approached, the music stopped abruptly. The ride was still, its horses frozen in mid-gallop. I radioed in, mentioning the strange incident, but my supervisor brushed it off as an old machine acting up. I wanted to believe him, so I continued my rounds, though I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in my gut. The next night, the same thing happened. This time, I was near the funhouse when I heard the faint echo of laughter. Not the joyful kind, but something distorted and eerie, like a recording played at the wrong speed. My flashlight flickered as I approached the entrance, the laughter growing louder. I called out, thinking it might be a trespasser, but there was no response. The funhouse was pitch black inside, and the laughter stopped as soon as I stepped through the door. I swept the area with my flashlight, but saw nothing out of the ordinary, just empty corridors and dusty mirrors. As I left the funhouse, I felt a chill run down my spine, and for the first time, I wondered if the ghost stories were more than just stories. I decided to keep these incidents to myself, not wanting to seem paranoid or incapable of handling the job. By the fifth night, I was on edge. It was a quiet evening, unusually so, and I was making my way towards the roller coasters when I noticed a light on in the old maintenance shed. The park's maintenance crew didn't work nights, so the shed should have been dark. I approached cautiously, my flashlight in one hand, the other resting on the baton at my belt. The door to the shed was ajar, and as I pushed it open, the light flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. I felt a rush of cold air and heard a faint whisper, like someone calling my name. My heart pounded in my chest as I swept the flashlight around. The shed was empty, save for old tools and cobwebs. I backed out quickly, deciding to call it in. As I turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind me with a force that made the ground shake. I spun around, but there was no one there. My radio crackled to life, and I heard static, followed by a garbled voice that sounded like my own, but distorted and twisted. Fear gripped me. I sprinted back to the main office, where I found my supervisor waiting. I told him everything, about the music, the laughter, the whispering. He listened, his face growing pale. When I finished, he sighed and said, "You're not the first to experience these things. This park has a history." He handed me a file, thick with reports from previous guards, all detailing similar experiences. Some had quit after just a few nights, unable to handle the strange occurrences. I felt a mix of relief and dread. At least I wasn't going crazy. I made it through the rest of the week without further incidents, but the sense of unease never left me. I decided to stick with the job, curious to uncover more about the park's haunted past. Over time, I learned to live with the odd happenings, but the feeling that something was watching me never went away. Years later, I still work at Lakeside, and the park still has its secrets. Some nights, when the wind is just right, I hear the carousel's music or the faint sound of laughter from the funhouse. And every time, I'm reminded that some stories are true, no matter how unbelievable they seem.